My name is Kurt Miner. I'm Senior Curator of History here at the State Museum of Pennsylvania. And I was a project curator for the exhibit behind me. It's called Pennsylvania Turnpike, America's First Superhighway. We opened this exhibit in October of 2015 to mark the 75th anniversary of the opening of the original section of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. When it opened on that date, October 1st, 1940, it was hailed as America's first superhighway and our country's answer to the German Autobahn. One of the stories we tell in this exhibit is the remarkable story of the building of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which began in October of 1938. It took about 23 months to build the original 160-mile section. Pennsylvania Turnpike followed the lead of the South Penn Railroad, which conceived the idea that the straightest point would involve creating and boring and excavating tunnels. The Pennsylvania Turnpike engineers realized that they could resuscitate about 7 of the 9 tunnels that were at least partially bored by the South Penn Railroad, so that by the opening of the Pennsylvania Turnpike in 1940, there were people who looked at it and began to describe it as a tunnel highway. It was remarkable to have these 7 tunnels that allowed for safe and efficient passage through what had always been the main obstacle to east-west travel in Pennsylvania, which were the Allegheny Mountains. Part of the modernization of the tunnels that Turnpike engineers worked on were ways to monitor carbon monoxide buildup from the anticipated automobile traffic. This is one of the carbon monoxide monitors that were installed in each one of the tunnels so that engineers could keep track of that and use fans and other ventilation devices to keep the tunnels cleared of this poisonous gas. This is a scale model of Sidling Hill Tunnel, which was one of the original 7 what were then called single tube tunnels that allowed passage through the Allegheny Mountains along the Pennsylvania Turnpike between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. This shows the original portal, and it also shows the housing on top of the portal, which was where the large fans were located that pushed fresh air through the tunnel to help clear out the carbon monoxide. The other point that this model demonstrates is the fact that the original tunnels were 2 lanes rather than 4 lanes, which was true of the rest of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. So as traffic was entering these tunnels, traffic had to slow to 35 miles an hour to accommodate 2 narrow lanes of traffic. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, when it opened, was a tolled highway, and it still is a tolled highway. The method of collecting tolls has changed over time. Of course, the fares have changed over time as well. What we show here is a collection of these fare cards that were distributed to motorists originally by hand and over time with automatic ticket dispensers. The fare was based on the type of vehicle you drove and, of course, the amount of miles that you drove on the Turnpike. The original round trip fare was about $2.25. We also show in this particular display case how ticket fare cards were displaced by electronic tolling through the Easy Pass, which is still the system that the Turnpike is using today. When the Pennsylvania Turnpike first opened, it was an absolute novelty. There was nothing else like it in the country, and people were actually coming from other countries, not only across our own country, to experience what was considered by one journalist with a little bit of hyperbole, this magic carpet ride across the Alleghenies. The Pennsylvania Turnpike really was a national story, and it really seeped into American popular culture. One of my favorite artifacts from that is this wonderful recording that we located. We just call it the Pennsylvania Turnpike song. Its actual title is Pennsylvania Turnpike, I Love You. It was written by a Pennsylvania native, a fellow named Von Horton. It was performed by Dick Todd and the Appalachian Wildcats, and it spoofs the joys and sometimes the frustrations of traveling the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Pennsylvania Turnpike, I love you so. All the way from
in an effort to educate motorists about the safe way to drive on a, quote, superhighway. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, especially in the early years, issued a number of really interesting brochures and public service announcements. This is one of my favorites. It's a brochure we found that shows sort of do's and don'ts for superhighway travel. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Don't make a U-turn in the middle of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Don't back up along the Turnpike. Don't park on the median strip. They also issued a number of PSAs, public service announcements, encouraging people to drive safely, to drive carefully, how to drive in the rain. Again, this was new to people, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike felt an obligation to educate.
Every 100 miles on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, units such as this safety patrol car with an oversized speedometer on the roof are on the move. Just added to the Turnpike's far-reaching safety program, the patrol cars are designed to make drivers conscious of their speeds. At the same time, the Commission points out, motorists can determine whether their speedometers are accurate.
So in addition to extending the Turnpike system after 1940 and the decades after World War II, the other major initiative of the Pennsylvania Turnpike system was to expand the capacity of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. By the 1950s, it was becoming apparent that the tunnels were a major obstacle for continuous traffic. That's because it had gotten so crowded. There was so much traffic. When traffic had to narrow to go through the tunnels, they would create these monster backups. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, after a study, decided to take another look at those tunnels, and in 4 instances, decided the most efficient way to expand the capacity of the Turnpike was to double tube those particular 4 tunnels. The other 3 tunnels were bypassed entirely, and these photographs show both a double tunnel at Allegheny, which was one of the tunnels that was retained, and also one of the bypasses, both the Sidling Hill bypass and the Laurel Hill bypass, both of which were completed in the late 1960s to allow for more continuous flow of traffic. So this has been a taste, an overview of our Pennsylvania Turnpike exhibit, which I hope you will all take the time to come here to the State Museum to see in person. It's a great story, and it's a story that most people aren't familiar with, but we found it really interesting because if you think of it this way, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, as America's first superhighway, is 160 miles long, but that 160 miles in time gives birth to an interstate highway system. It doesn't just change the way Pennsylvania's traveled, and it certainly did. It cut travel time between Pittsburgh and Harrisburg by half, but it changed the way Americans traveled because it really was the seed to a much larger system that has now much a part of American travel as anything else could possibly be. It's really part of our way of life.